So, the room's full of dangerous people. None quite so dangerous as Catherine Bleish. This little pregnant lady that's going to be coming up here has been named to the Southern Poverty Law Center as one of America's most dangerous patriots. She doesn't need an introduction.
Hi everybody. Really nice to be back in New Hampshire. I'm celebrating tomorrow the 1-year anniversary of getting arrested here in New Hampshire.
Let's do it again.
Oh, you want me to explain? Last year, this actually has something to do with nullification. I was going to talk about it later, but I'll talk about it right now. We'll just open up with it. Last year, I was a speaker at an event called the Liberty Forum. I do a presentation called Understanding the Mechanics of a Police State, which you're going to be getting the nitty-gritty, short, summary version today, but I have a really long, in-depth presentation that I do where I go through and talk about the institutions that are growing around us that are using force to manipulate our behavior here in our society. These are institutions that we and our grandchildren are currently funding, which is quite tragic. I was out here to give a presentation on that, and there was a group who has been working hard to nullify the enforcement of marijuana laws in Keene, and they had been doing these things called 420 smokeouts, where they would go and they would smoke in the middle of a town square, and they kept doing it over and over and over and over despite being arrested, until they just quit going out and arresting them. And I thought this was really neat, and I had my video camera, and they were going to do one in Nashua. So I attended with my video camera, and by the end of the event, long story short, 2 undercover cops arrested one little black boy who happened to walk up on the event that was full of, like 80 white people. And I was pretty upset, and so I walked up to the officer with my video camera, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You've smoked pot before, why are you picking on this kid? And long story short, after sticking a German Shepherd barking in my face, I went to jail. I was arrested, and I had to fly out here twice for court. And thankfully, other activists funded that because I was literally living on the road giving speeches out of my car about the police state, the irony. And I was found not guilty for, what was it? Disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. The arrest that took all of 6 seconds to happen. So tomorrow's my 1-year anniversary, so welcome back, New Hampshire. Let me start my stopwatch. I'm a little behind. Okay, so the topic I'm going to be discussing today is not exactly a fun topic to discuss, and I'm going to try and keep it as undepressing as possible. But it is a topic that affects every single person here in this room, every single person in our society, and across the globe. And I'm going to make the argument today that we are in fact living in the beginning stages of a very real, very intrusive police state. And I'm not talking small scale here, I'm talking massive technological capabilities that are happening in real time. They're being implemented right now. Now it's scary and it's hard to digest, and no one wants to think about it. I didn't want to think about this stuff until I began to be personally affected by this. And it became very real for me, and there were several examples where the state did affect me. They used violence against me for speaking in Missouri. I was arrested then, and I wasn't even trying to, protest. I was just being myself and sticking up for some people I saw being bullied, which I would do anywhere against anyone, badge or no badge, I would like to say. But there is a solution. That's the beautiful part, and you guys right here are the solution. We are the solution. And if not through our city and state representative government, because the federal government has already proven that they are no part of the solution, they are indeed the main root cause of the problem. And if we have the potential, we do have the potential right now to utilize our city and state representative governments, and if that doesn't work, we have ourselves. because we are the most powerful beings on this planet as individuals. And so it is up to us as individuals. Now, I'm going to start off with just a brief list of evidence here that we are, in fact, living in the beginning stages of a police state. Body scanners, TSA, fusion centers, the drug war, Iraq and Afghanistan, forced blood withdrawals, checkpoints, license plates, RFID tracking technology, DNA storage of newborn babies' blood by the state, sometimes without not only parental consent, but without parental knowledge. Warrantless wiretapping, the IRS, license plate scanning technology, red light cameras, the threat of mandatory vaccines, HR 645, which would create, it's sitting idly right now, legislation, HR 645, that would create no fewer than 6 detention centers on existing military bases where the control would be moved from the DOD to DHS. That sounds lovely. Tasers, police brutality, being arrested for videotaping, free speech zones, behavior recognition monitoring in airports, intelligence-led policing, and the best part of all this, we're paying for this. We are. We are funding this. We are allowing it to happen because it's so scary that it really is hard to accept in the first place, let alone know what to do against it, because we are not violent people. We don't want violence. We don't want to point a gun at another person unless we're trying to defend ourselves or our family. So it doesn't make sense to us that someone else would do it to us, and that they would steal our money to do it to us. So it's hard to think about how to respond. Now, if that list isn't specific enough, I'm going to try and break this down quickly and simply, give some examples of the problem in detail, as well as some examples of solution. So just for my personal understanding of where we stand in the crowd, how many people have heard of a fusion center? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, more than half the room. How many people know what I'm saying when I say MIAC report? A little fewer, okay. In 2009, I was living in Missouri, which is my home state, and I live in Texas. And I got a phone call one morning. This is after I was very involved in the 2008 Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul's political campaign. And I was transitioning to state legislative activism. I was helping, which we did successfully, nullify Real ID in the state of Missouri. But I got a phone call that kind of scared me a little and changed my life. It was the fact that the Missouri Information Analysis Center, the MIAC, had issued a strategic report on the modern militia movement that said people who supported Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, or Bob Barr, people who support the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, people who had seen the movie America, Freedom to Fascism, people concerned with the IRS, the Federal Reserve Banking System, RFID tracking technology, basically any form of oppression. If you're concerned with that, the NAFTA superhighway, then you should be considered a potentially radical violent militia member. So imagine how I felt. I'm out here lobbying all my state reps to get rid of the Real ID. I'm knocking on doors to tell people about Ron Paul. It was America, Freedom to Fascism that actually got me, motivated me involved in politics. And now my highway patrol people with guns that approach my vehicle think the fact that I have a bumper sticker on the back of my car means I might be a threat? That was kind of scary, I'll be honest. And I literally dropped everything to fight that. And it wasn't just me, it was a coalition of people, not just in the state of Missouri, but all across the country that had to join forces and come together and literally bombard our state with messages of, we won't travel to Missouri because we don't want to have this sort of treatment. You're losing tourist dollars. There was a big Campaign for Liberty conference that was taking place, the first one in St. Louis. And you know what? People moved their hotels over to Illinois so that they didn't have to pay tax money to Missouri. So the pressure was on hot, and they ended up retracting that report. But during that process of pushing back against that and testifying in front of the state legislature about it, I learned what a fusion center was. The Missouri Information Analysis Center was one of 4 fusion centers in Missouri. There's one here in New Hampshire. It's brand new, about a year old. Congratulations. What these institutions do is they merge different jurisdictions of law enforcement together. So your campus police department, your city law enforcement, your state highway patrol, your FBI, CIA, even international foreign governments and private corporations are collecting bits of data and information. And they use this data to create what is called intelligence, which is a big picture of the potential of crime or the future of a movement of people. And they try to predict violence or predict crime before it happens. Now, unfortunately, this report that profiled many people here in this room as a potentially radical violent militia member, and don't worry, it was sent to fusion centers all across the country. It was not just in Missouri, so we were all stuck in there together. Not only did this report come out, but through our open records request process, we found out that there were indeed 13 reports that had been issued by the MIAC, and they profiled mostly groups and people who were concerned with growing centralization of power at the federal level, whether it was quote-unquote anarchists, or if it was anti-war lefties, or they even specifically mentioned the sovereign citizen movement, and people like Ed and Elaine Brown, who are now incarcerated for not wanting to pay their taxes to an institution that they didn't believe in. So they began listing groups in these profiles and creating an idea in the mind of law enforcement that people who question the constitutionality of the government's behavior should be seen as a threat. This isn't unique to Missouri. This happens all across the globe. Now, where did these come from? In 2002, the first mention of them that I have found is from an International Chief of Police Conference that takes place annually, the IACP. The next time they pop up is when they became the Department of Homeland Security official policy in 2005 under Chertoff. And it was in 2011 that the 9/11 Implementation Act was passed, which actually gave legislative backing to the 9/11 Commission report and some of the recommendations that had been made in there. And in those recommendations were the creation of these, quote, fusion centers. I'm sure you all remember there's a lack of communication. We've got to be able to communicate better. This wouldn't have happened if we'd been able to talk faster and communicate better. So that's the guise of what these are being created under. Initially it was to fight terrorism. Now when in places like Missouri and Montana, the terror threat is like none, right? And so they were having a hard time justifying the existence of these institutions. They slowly became all crimes. So then instead of just collecting information that might have something to do with potential terrorists, they start collecting information on crimes. And now some of them, not all of them, focus on all hazards. So meaning anything that could be a hazard to anybody, whether it's nature or a terrorist or a criminal or whatever, falls under this umbrella to be, researched under the Fusion Center. Now, the 3 major problems that I have with these institutions are A, the erosion of sovereignty, especially for our law enforcement community. Your city and state law enforcement are losing the opportunity to operate as autonomous institutions, and they are no longer directly accountable to the local communities when they are beholden by a grant application process, a funding process through the Department of Homeland Security. You see, Sheriff Mack actually took the Brady bill all the way up to the Supreme Court, and he won. And in that decision, it came down that federal law enforcement may not commandeer state or local law enforcement for their bidding. So the federal law enforcement cannot come in and ask state or local law enforcement to do what they want. But, at least in that instance, nothing was said about them bribing them to do what they want and dangling money in the forms of grants in front of them to do what they want. So they're very much so just going right around the Constitution, just skirting right around it, because our cities, our city police department or our state highway patrol are applying for a grant from DHS. So this isn't even being forced upon your local law enforcement. They are asking asking for it. And they're asking for it because right now, economically, everyone's struggling, whether it's the state or just, your average person trying to eat every day. And in fact, talking to the head of the Missouri Information Analysis Center, he just straight up told me, I draw the line at you taking the 30 jobs that are underneath of me. So if you can find another way to fund these jobs, I will consider it if it's not DHS money. But until you find that other means, I'm going to put my foot down and fight against you, because he couldn't look his 30 fusion center staff in the eye and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go find another job. So the erosion of sovereignty, and that's through the bribery process, the grant funding process, and they're literally, you are seeing the autonomy just completely disappear. The universal profiling and training. So, has everybody here heard of the Southern Poverty Law Center? Is there anybody that hasn't? Anybody? Okay, a couple hands. The Southern Poverty Law Center was formed in the 1970s to basically defend civil liberties. It has evolved into, well, some would argue, some would argue that there's actually more nefarious intentions in the beginning, but at least right now, in action, what they serve to do is to identify white supremacists and violent militia types and hate groups and things like that. Now, out every quarter to law enforcement and fusion centers all across the country, this lovely document right here called the Intelligence Report. Now, if you could see this up and close, this is their, summer 2010 issue number 138, called Meet the Patriots. A new generation leads the reborn anti-government movement. My picture's right smack dab in the middle. Some of my heroes and good friends are pictured right alongside me. I don't know how myself, just some young, crazy little campaign girl, ended up wrapped up into all this, but it's because I really believe that we are in a position where we have the opportunity to change the direction things are heading, and if we don't do it now, we might lose that opportunity. So I haven't looked back, and I haven't stopped, and I've just been, going 90 miles an hour. So, the sovereignty, the fact that they are being trained, so the Southern Poverty Law Center gets paid by DHS to train fusion centers on how to identify potential hate groups and potential violent radical militia members. This is dangerous. This is very dangerous. When they are profiling the people that you and I respect as lovers of freedom and peace and the Constitution and mutual respect toward fellow human beings, it doesn't involve pointing guns at each other, and they're demonizing us as the threat to our law enforcement, that puts us in a dangerous situation that I think we do, through groups like Oath Keepers, have the opportunity to push back. And my third major problem is how invasive the technology is quickly becoming. Not many people know this, but the FBI have a fingerprint database called the NCIC database. There's all these different tracks. It's got the no-fly list, the terror watch list, blah, 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 blah. That converted last year to what is called the NGI database, the Next Generation Identification Database. So the fingerprint portion I'm discussing here. And so instead of just tracking fingerprints, starting last year, so when I got arrested here in New Hampshire, the FBI started tracking palm prints. So even though I was found not guilty, my entire palms, every marking on my hands are now in an FBI database. And so are most of the people who were processed last year, guilty or not, through the jail, processing system. Now, this year, 2011, they start tracking facial recognition. Yeah, the year after that is eyeball scanners, and the year after that is the scar and tattoo database. This is the Next Generation Identification Database by the FBI. This is your taxpayer dollars. It is debt on the backs of your unborn great-grandchildren that are funding this right here, right now. So you already see the retinal scanners at customs checkpoints, people coming into the United States, they're having their eyes scanned. We're using this technology in Iraq and Afghanistan on brown people who are not protected by the Constitution, and they are bringing it back here.
Scan everybody that goes through Disney World.
They do scan everybody that goes through Disney World?
Yes. They scan everybody that goes through Disney
Lovely.
World.
So that's what's happening right now, and so we need to be prepared for the fact that there are soon going to be facial recognition scanners in jails, in wherever. Now, last year we went to the National Fusion Center Conference, which they have every year. One just happened this week in Colorado, and I chose to come up here instead of going there. But we went last year and we got in as the press. We made press passes, Austin Free Press, and we got into the National Fusion Center Conference. And they did call hotel security on us at first. They didn't know what to do, which I thought was so ironic, right? The people who are charged with protecting the homeland are calling hotel security on some independent journalists. Right. At this meeting, one of the workshops I attended, they were talking about the speed cameras, the red light cameras on all of these, and how they were moving to the next generation identification database. And at the end, there was a hand, and I said, "Hi, I have a quick question. Is there a plan to integrate the two of these technologies, you know, with the facial recognition, the eyeball, and the traffic highway scanners?" And his response, which got lots of laughter in the room, was, "Not yet." So that means it's coming. They don't have that put together yet, as he said. He was an FBI staffer. So those are my three big issues with these fusion centers: the fact that they are eroding the sovereignty, the fact that they are using extremely invasive technology, and the fact that it is unifying all of the training that every single law enforcement official receives. Now, it doesn't work this way just for fusion centers. I gave this very specific example because most people, A, don't know what they are, B, wouldn't know what they were if someone wasn't telling them, but C, because it's the same similar process for many of the different police state functions that are being implemented today, whether it's blood withdrawals that are happening on the sides of highways, or if it is checkpoints that are taking place. Most, if not all of these, have some aspect of federal funding that are cutting down behind them. So, and that goes for TSA, even if they're not getting funding to have the body scanner, they're afraid of losing funding by saying no to it. Like down in Austin, the city council saying, well, we're afraid to say no to the federal government about these body scanners, even though all the people here say they don't want them, because we're afraid we'll lose FAA grants. So one of the biggest threats to our personal sovereignty and to our state's ability to function as free institutions is the money that they are dangling in front of our elected officials, is the propaganda that they are shoving down the throats of our law enforcement. And so that means that nullification comes into play in several ways here for us. First and foremost, we need to start saying no to grants. Let's go to our city council meetings and go to our state legislative hearings, and let's talk to our representatives about alternative solutions. We don't have to fund this disgusting technology, this invasive and abusive practices. We don't have to fund it on the backs of our grandchildren. Another way that we could fight against this using nullification would be to nullify the 9/11 Implementation Act of 2007 that authorized these fusion centers. Go talk to your state reps. Get them to undo that